Hi everyone. So I'm Neil McCray, you already heard that. I'm a philosophy major and I also have a kind of doing a BSS that combines aspects of political philosophy and public policy. So my primary interest has sort of always been in the relationship between public policy and political philosophy. Fortunately, I got the opportunity to sort of combine those two things together when I went as an intern to work at the Goldwater Institute for 2 months in September and October of last year. So the Goldwater Institute was founded in 1988 with basically the goal of trying to decrease the size of Arizona's state government, to increase economic prosperity and freedom across the state. And since then, they've decided to start trying to design policies that can be modeled across the United States by other states. They've worked to design a lot of different pieces of legislation to sort of increase the amount of freedom across the United States. So that's sort of their goal, and that's what originally attracted me to the Goldwater Institute. The primary project that I was working on while I was at Goldwater was working with the director of their Center for Economic Prosperity, Dr. Byron Schlomack. Basically, the project I was working on was putting together an index of port proximity and economic prosperity for US states. There's a lot of data involved in that project, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. You guys probably don't want to know the details, but if you do, he'll be writing a paper at some point in the next few years that I'm sure you'd all love to read. So the other projects that I worked on were doing literature reviews. So he was also really interested in some economics literature that related economic freedom and economic prosperity. So I was sort of reviewing the literature on that and finding documents that he could read, and sort of he didn't have to go through JSTOR, I could do it for him. I reviewed city finances, which was even worse than the first project as far as interest for you guys. I looked into something that was really interesting, which was funding from Arizona for job training programs for their investigative reporter at Goldwater. What I found was actually that Goldwater was basically doing a corporate welfare program and taking a bunch of funding from small businesses across Arizona and then funneling that to some of the largest corporations that were in Arizona, like some mining companies and a couple of banks. And then in addition to that, I also did some research on the Affordable Care Act. So like I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail. If you're interested in port proximity and how that relates to economic prosperity, you can ask me when this is over. But that's all the steps that were involved. So the results of my internship, I actually didn't get to find out about anything to do with the index that I put together while I was at Goldwater. Dr. Schlomack ran the regressions after I left. All that I found out was that there is apparently a positive relationship between port proximity and economic prosperity. So who knew that if someone is actually closer to water, they're more likely to be economically prosperous? And he's going to write a paper about that at some point in the future. So what did I learn while I was at Goldwater? So academically, I told you guys I'm a philosophy major, and then I delved into politics long enough to get political philosophy out of it. And then I took maybe 2 public policy courses while I'm at Cornell. So I'm very abstract and sort of philosophy based. While I was at Goldwater, I heard about philosophy maybe once and spent all of my time doing data processing. So I learned how to compile data efficiently and sort of learned how to work with numbers for the first real time. And I learned how to work with JSTOR a little bit from my economics literature review. So academically, I got exposed to something I'd pretty much not touched on at all prior to going to Goldwater. Professionally, I got to work at a state-based think tank. So I've known for a long time that I either want to go to graduate school or I want to work at a think tank. I wasn't sure until I went to Goldwater, and now I know that I definitely want to work at a think tank after going to graduate school, so kind of both. I worked on unfamiliar topics like economics literature reviews and working with numbers that I hadn't done before. And I learned about state-level policy advocacy. So far at Cornell, I spent most of my time learning about sort of federal-level policy and political philosophy. I sort of focused a lot more at the state level while I was there. So as far as the impact that my internship sort of had on my future, academically, I learned that there's sort of a connection between the economic theories that I learned while I was at Goldwater and the theories that I've learned at Cornell and sort of empirical practice, so that was really interesting. I learned about state-level policy advocacy, which I already sort of mentioned. And then I learned about the relationship with political philosophy and public policy, which, as I told you at the beginning, is sort of my primary interest. Goldwater is an institute that's founded on certain beliefs in political philosophy, and then they translate those into public policy. Seeing that that could actually happen was really interesting. Professionally, I made connections at Goldwater, and I expanded my resume to actually include something practical and in the real world, which hopefully is helpful. It either helped me get into graduate school or maybe will help me get a job at a think tank. I'll find out the results about one of my interviews tomorrow. So I'd like to say thank you to a few people. The first is my internship or my fellowship was named in honor of Elijah Leroy Guild, so thank you. I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Byron Schlomack, who couldn't come by. He was my site supervisor. And thanks to Dr. Rob Sutherland, who was my faculty supervisor and helped me get that internship. Also thanks to Dean Reeson, who was critical in me getting to work at Goldwater. So thank you to all of them.